This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Hey everyone, this is Peter Zablocki, the host of the Daily History Shorts podcast. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. If this is your first time stopping by, I hope you stick around and return tomorrow for more fun history. And if you enjoy these Friday conversation series, you can always find the entire backlog of conversations with historians, authors, Pulitzer Prize winners, and much more under the Conversations tab on our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Today's conversation is proudly brought to you by The Collector, your destination for captivating stories that teach, inform, and inspire millions of readers every day. From ancient history to today's defining moments, from philosophy and art to exclusive interviews. Discover more at thecollector.com. Our guest today is the Deputy Director of the Warsaw Ghetto Museum and a distinguished Polish historian specializing in the history of Polish Jews during the Holocaust and its aftermath. She is a recipient of the prestigious International History Award, the Dan David Prize, for her work amplifying marginalized voices, and has made significant contributions to Holocaust scholarship, particularly through her research on the Warsaw Ghetto and the Ringelblum Archive. Here to talk about it is Katarzyna Person. Katarzyna, thank you for speaking with me today.
Thank you for having me.
So your research focuses on the experiences of Polish Jews during and after the Holocaust. What drew you to this topic and this area of study, and what surprised you the most going on this path or going through this path?
Well, I am from Warsaw. I'm originally from Warsaw, which was the city with the largest European Jewish community before the war, and also the site of the Warsaw Ghetto, which I worked on. So a large part of my city became the largest ghetto in occupied Europe. And that's something that lived alongside through my all my life. So I think that's the first thing that really grabbed me and really brought me into this topic was how local it was. It was part of my local history. And secondly, I became really fascinated by how people deal with difficult circumstances, difficult or borderline circumstances. So how they approach, how they act, and why they act in the way they do. So the result of that was my research was to a large degree on people who are even in the ghetto placed in a situation which is particularly difficult. So I worked on people who are members of the German imposed administration, and then I worked on how those actions are remembered after the war. So I worked on post-war courts and various acts of personal revenge.
Is there anything about this journey, like looking back, that you think back and you're like, that was like a wow moment for you, getting into this and studying this and making this your career, when you're like, these are some of the turning points in my career?
I think when these stories become personal, I think when you start to really, I don't want to say feel because you can't do that, but when those people become to a very large degree part of your lives, that's when it happened to me. When I started really understanding, not understand, I mean, all these words are so difficult, right?
Yes.
So to say understanding them, but at least trying to understand.
Empathizing, at least trying to empathize.
Try,
right?
maybe, yes, but with the choices. And I think what is interesting is this evolved with me. I became interested in the topic as I was finishing high school, so about 18 years old. And I am now, of course, much older. And my life story is also linked to my research. When I was 18, I was, seeing people who are fighting in Warsaw Ghetto Uprising as, as grown-ups who are engaging in a fight. Today, I look at them as children, and I see them as young, very, very young people who are put in this horrible circumstances. So my attitude, also to the sort of children changed with me becoming a mother as well. That changed. All of those change. I am now at the age which, in the ghetto will be considered to be an old age. It's already the age when you have teenage children, when you are the one who's, in a way, expected to sacrifice yourself for those who are younger. So all those, I think, played an important part.
It puts your life in perspective. The Ringelblum Archive, which you've worked extensively on, is a remarkable act of defiance and documentation under extreme conditions, but yet it's not really known or spoken about in the overall scholarship of the Holocaust, at least out west, but in the United States. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on Emanuel Ringelblum and also this amazing story, because you did spend a lot of time working on this?
I
A lot
did.
of time.
All my life, half my life now. Emanuel Ringelblum was a historian, a teacher, social activist before the war, who, once the war started in Poland, he was actually in Switzerland. He decided to come back. He was in a Zionist Congress in Switzerland. He decided to come back in order, as he said, to be with his people. And he comes back to Poland, to Warsaw, and he realizes that what's happening around him is something different than what was happening before. He starts by writing a diary like everybody else, and then he quickly realizes something else is necessary. And that the choice that he's making at that point is a choice as to who will write, as he actually wrote it, who will write the history. So who is going to write the history of Jews in occupied Poland? Will it be Poles as bystanders? Will it be Germans, the oppressors, or will it be them themselves? Will be a history actually written by them? And he basically, what he decides is to write that we need, as a community in this particularly difficult situation, need to write our own history. We need to provide sources for historians. Even if we die, whatever happens to us, we are the ones who are responsible for gathering sources regarding our fate and writing our own story. And the result of that is the underground archive of the Warsaw Ghetto, which begins vaguely around the moment the ghetto is sealed off in autumn of 1940. And the aim of and this is again something that's fascinating. The aim of the archive is to write full story of the Warsaw Ghetto, and by full story, Ringelblum very consciously means not just a heroic story, not just a nice story, which he's plenty of examples of. So it's not going to be a story of heroism of doctors, teachers, and shelters for children. Not just that story. It's also going to be a very complex story of what's happening to a community which is put in such a condition. So he's also interviewing people who are at the very bottom of the ghetto hierarchy. So people who are refugees, deportees, who are dying of hunger on ghetto streets. He's interviewing women. His team, which he builds, which also includes a lot of women, actually. They talk to women about issues of abuse, of gender-specific violence. They talk about families falling apart. They talk about people who become very wealthy and also people who become very poor. He very consciously writes a non-elite story of the Warsaw Ghetto. And this is an act of unbelievable heroism. Not just the fact that he actually creates this archive and does it underground is, of course, done in great danger, in incredibly difficult circumstances, when the creators of the archives are themselves, hungry and have very limited capacity to work. But I think the heroism of actually facing your nation's history or your society's history and actions, facing them fully, and knowing that whatever you write and whatever you hide will be the things that they will be judged upon after the war ends, is something unbelievable. That's what they do. And I think how we know that it's why we see that it's so unusual is the fact that, as you said, the archive is not very well known, and it's not very well known for two reasons. One, because it was created in Yiddish, Polish, Hebrew, so in not very easily accessible languages. Also because it stayed in Poland, that's another issue. But the third issue is how difficult the story was after the war, and how the story of sexual abuse was not considered to be the story, for example, that is the fit story of survival or of not survival, death during the war. How the story of smuggling or of crime is not the story that we want to embrace as our story as survivors. And this is, of course, not just an issue of the community of Holocaust survivors. That's any community that was under occupation and had to face such choices and such actions. But this was an incredibly modern archive.
The story of the archives themselves, not what's in them, but the story of finding them is also fascinating because they didn't find all of them, right? They only found two, I think, of three. Is that right? Or
Yeah,
am I wrong?
that's a great question. The archive was hidden. As I said, it was hidden. That's another the miracle of the archives, how it was uncovered. But it was hidden in the first part in the summer of 42. So during the wars, the deportations from the Warsaw Ghetto, the summer action, when 300,000 people from Warsaw Ghetto is murdered in Treblinka over 3 months, and the second in the beginning of 1943. So just before January, around the January action, and then before the Warsaw Ghetto uprising.
Hmm.
And the issue, of course, that we have is whether there actually ever was a third part. There was
Hmm.
talk of the famous third part, which was meant to be hidden uh, during the Warsaw Ghetto uprising. But I don't know if we actually know for sure if it really existed. But I think what is wonderful about the archive, and also our need for the archive and our need for remembering, is how much effort was put in 1945, 1946 to find the first part. If we think about the Jewish community in Poland at that point, which is uh, incredibly small, it's people who
I
are
was gonna
coming
say
back,
almost non-existent. Yeah,
almost non-existent.
yeah.
Those who come back into Warsaw are those who survive our in camps in the Soviet Union, who get out of hiding, who are looking for the family members. We have, of course, often children uh, who are um, who are in hiding. A community which is also incredibly impoverished, like everybody else around them, which is also on the brink of leaving, right? Because we have growing anti-Semitism, pogroms, and a community which is on the verge of this incredibly difficult question: shall we stay or shall we go? You know, are we emigrating? Where
Mm.
are we emigrating? The state of Israel is no longer, no, you're not yet there. So this incredibly difficult conditions, this community puts so much effort into locating the archive, and actually locating where it was, and then finding founds to dig in and to find it in the ruins of Warsaw. It was incredibly complex undertaking, but it was important. It was clearly important, more important than anything else at that point, to find it.
Yeah, I think they found the first one in 46, right? But the second one took a few years. Wasn't it like 1950, if I remember reading?
Yeah, the second part was found in 1950, so 4 years later. The first part was hidden in metal boxes, and the second part was hidden in
Jugs, yeah, yeah, yeah.
milk jugs. Yeah, something like a like the hermetically sealed.
Exactly, yeah. It's still amazing that that they found it. I mean, Warsaw was in ruins by the time they were looking. There was no Warsaw in a
There
sense,
was no
right?
Warsaw, and that's why I didn't find the second part, because they were hidden together. The first and
Yeah.
second part were actually hidden exactly the same spot.
Wow.
They found the first one. They found the location. They found the first one. They did not find the second one. The second one was actually found by chance during building works, when Muranov was being created,
Wow.
the new
The housing, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and they found it by chance and brought it there. The third part, if it existed, the problem with the third part was that it was hidden in a space which became the Chinese embassy.
Mm.
So no work could be carried out in Chinese embassy or underneath Chinese embassy until early 2000s, when it was carried out, and nothing of that
Was
value
fun.
of nothing was found. That was the archive. But of course, again, when we say about nothing being found in the area of former ghetto, there's always something, in a sense that if you come to Warsaw, in the former ghetto area, there's a city underneath a city.
Yeah.
The ghetto was raised to the ground, and on top of it, a new city was built on top of these cellars. So wherever you go there, wherever you dig, you find the city.
Amazing story.
It's a tragic story. It's also a story of how Warsaw deals with it now, and how do you live in a place like that? Maybe less so now, but in the past, how do you build a new life on the ruins of the old one, and then
Yeah.
how do you build a new life on the shadows of a community which is no longer there, which used to be one third of the city? How do you
Yeah.
do that? So that's something that's also very interesting.
I think that's a perfect segue, actually, because I was going to ask you about the Polish and Jewish relations being a very sensitive topic, since I remember being born all the way to today. How do you see the role of historians in addressing tensions between collective memory and historical truth? And also, maybe, in what ways do you think that memory of the Holocaust in Poland has evolved in recent decades?
Uh, if it has evolved thanks to historians. And I think the Poland was the absolute turning point when it comes to the memory of Holocaust in Poland was 2000 and the publication of Jan Gross's Neighbors, a book by Jan Gross, who was a historian at that point, work in America, who wrote a book about a small town in Jedwabne, in which Polish neighbors murdered in a pogrom the Jewish neighbors. And that book was a beginning of a huge public debate about Polish Jewish. I don't know if I should refer to as Polish Jewish relations, but relations between Poles and Jews during the Holocaust. The role of the bystander, the role of a bystander who's actually actively involved in murdering the neighbors, and those who are also involved in helping, and I think that's the great question that arose: whether can you actually be a bystander? What it means to remain passive? Can you be passive in such a situation? Is being passive also taking a stand? So this huge debate started, and well, it's pretty much going on to this day. If we see, presidential elections right now, it's still big. It's still something that's not fully worked through, but I think it has to be said that that there is a debate about it. The post-war history is also unbelievably difficult, uh, and there's more and more research on those who survived the Holocaust and who left Poland in incredibly difficult circumstances. I said, often following the Kielce pogrom in 1946, who left Poland, which was their country, the country they grew up in. They grew up their country. There was
Yeah.
often it was there on
They
the
were
planet.
Polish. Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
Polish, and they left, and they were forced out, as they consider themselves to be forced out. They were, and they were extremely. It was an extremely emotionally challenging time to them when it comes to relationship to Poland. So that's something that we also should remember when we look at this post-war narrative. But I think, as you were talking about the role of the historians, and I think that's something that historians have to do, especially when it comes to Polish Jewish history. We have to deal with facts. We also have to deal with memory. We need this because we need full context also to honor these who acted honorably. In a sense, if we are to fully understand how heroic it was, what a heroic action it was to save someone during the Holocaust, we also have to understand how incredibly hostile the environment was. We
Yeah.
can't just look at them as, just look at, the good aspects of it and see them that way. But I think in order to fully grasp the enormity of their experience, and we have to also write about everything else that was happening around them.
Yeah.
It's important also, and that's what we were trying to do in the Warsaw Ghetto Museum, which I now direct, is to show that the experience of the Holocaust is not just Auschwitz and Warsaw Ghetto, that it's also an experience of small towns, of villages, of tiny ghettos, of people who are not murdered in a camp, but who are murdered in a ditch or in a forest or on the street of the small town, and to bring back those voices as well and those stories, which are again not part of this sort of media popular story of the Holocaust, makes it in a way we can maybe not relate, but we understand the human aspect of it, because we think about small town, everybody knows each other. It's different than if we think only about a huge camp where victims are portrayed as sort of unified without any backstory.
So, as a director now of the Warsaw Ghetto Museum, do you guys work closely with the Auschwitz Museum, or even in the United States, the Holocaust Museum, Washington, D.C.? Do you have any programs that, I guess, what the relationship is with other institutions?
Well, we're only beginning. Our
Okay.
museum is still under construction. It will be based in a former hospital in the Warsaw Ghetto, but we do have an extensive collaboration program
Network. Yeah.
network, especially when it comes to education. Um, especially when it comes to education, but also exchange of expertise and knowledge. But also when it comes to discussing how we should portray the Holocaust at this stage, when almost all of the witnesses are gone now, and how do we change this narrative? How do we make it applicable to what's happening now, and how do we use it to reach people as well?
When do you open your doors?
In 2027, September 2027.
Well, that's gonna come up quick.
I know, it's petrifying, but yes, it's coming very quick. It's a huge construction site at this moment, but the exhibition is being created.
Are you part of that? Are you directly involved in the exhibitions and the curating aspect and finding all these different artifacts as well?
Well, not as much as I'd like, because I suddenly have a lot of administration work and other things I have to do. But I am involved in it, and it's important because I worked before that on Ringelblum Archive, so a museum which brings those unheard voices back, and voices which were not only unheard during the Holocaust, but also voices which were very often silenced after the war, such as I mentioned, voices of women or children, or voices who are not deemed to be fit,
Worthy almost, right, of being talked about. Yeah.
of being talked about. And the situation that 80 years on, we still have to bring them back. They are still not part, really, truly, of the mainstream narrative. I think that's something that is important. It's an important part of this museum's role.
So my last question for you, I kind of shift gears a little bit. You've written quite a few books. Your last one that comes out in the US is called The Hour of Revenge, Holocaust Survivors and Their Search for Revenge and Retribution. What was the impetus and the idea for this book? And while you were, again, we talked about this before we click record, you wrote this, it takes a while for a book to finally be published and go through edits, and this might have been a while, but what got you to write this particular book? And what surprised you the most while doing this research?
I actually worked extensively before on people who worked in the administration, in the German post-administration, Nazi post-administration in the ghettos and camps. So people who work as prisoner functionaries or members of the Jewish order service or the so-called Jewish police in the ghettos, and the choices they faced and the choices they made and why they did it. And I think what interested me, what became really fascinating to me, was how those who survived lived within the same community after the war, and what happened to them. That was one part of it. And the second part of it was, if you're a Holocaust survivor in Poland and you are powerless, how do you take revenge? And on who do you take revenge? Can you take it on, how do you take it on Poles? How do you take it on Germans? How do you take it on other Jews? And that was something that really fascinated me. And also the stories of revenge, which were in writings in the 50s, 40s about the people who took this almost mythological revenge. I also started working on Jewish honor codes, where people were tried within the Jewish communities in Poland, but also abroad. And I also saw how this search for justice is following them as they go. It doesn't end in Poland. It's still in them. The need to get justice is still in them, whether they go to Israel, America, or to South America, wherever they live. They still need to see justice, one way or another, and how they seek it and what they understand as justice. All of these were questions which I'm at least posing in the book.
Katarzyna, where can my listeners go to learn more about your work?
My book is coming out, as you said, in the end of June with Toronto University Press. My previous book on the Jewish order service, the Jewish Warsaw Ghetto Police, was published a couple of years ago by Cornell University Press. It's also available in English.
And where can they go to learn more about the museum coming up?
To the museum website, www.1943.pl.
Well, Katarzyna, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's wonderful. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with AutoQuote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.